everybody. Welcome to More Than Words podcast. This is your host, Cherie
and Liz. Oh, wait, we
have a great... No, Liz, it's fine. We're going to keep moving with it. Listen, we have a great opportunity here. I don't know if you know, I don't know if you feel all the energy, the music in the background, but we are broadcasting live for you from the UK with a special guest.
London, baby.
Yes,
so we have Susi here.
Yes. And so what we're about to do, we're about to speed this thing up because I know you want to know about our guests. But before we get started, those of you joining us for the first time, we always like to start with an auntie moment, which this is our opportunity to talk about what is daring, what is exciting, some things that we need to call people to the carpet on, or just something fun that lets you know Liz and I a little differently. So anyway, Liz says she has an auntie moment. We haven't connected, so I can't wait to hear it. So Liz, tell them all about it.
I do. And Susi, you can feel free to jump right in here because I think this is going to resonate with you. And it's just exactly what we were talking about in the pre-show. Okay. So my house has been a mess. We've been moving, cleaning. Yes, I do have my holiday decorations up. No judgment, y'all. I know November 1st is when I usually get it. Okay. I'm a joyful person. So there's that. Anyways, my house is a mess. We've been planning our podcast for 2023. We're working and all that stuff. And I have not had time to clean my house. And it's just a mess, right? But I refuse to outsource this job. I refuse to do it because no one cleans like a Latina cleans, okay? We get that fabuloso, but I have to find my new products here. And I'm okay with them sponsoring us if they want to come and sponsor us.
I was going to say, Fabuloso, come get us.
I'll get some Fabuloso earrings. So, just saying. You want a Christmas present? I would love some Fabuloso Christmas presents, please and thank you. So, and I started thinking about this, and I'm like, and Cherie, this is a little bit of something what we talked about when we did the special McKinsey report on how us women tend to take the mental load of the household more often than not, which tends to exhaust us, right? Whether we have a family, whether we don't, whether we have friends, and even whether we have an immediate family or whether we have a family that's beyond the immediate in our physical house, we tend to take that mental load and we carry it in the workplace as well. What stops us from outsourcing these things that will improve our lives better? You know what? It's better for me to have my house clean in some kind of fashion or form than to be walking around going, oh my gosh. Because for me, a clean house means like my mind is so fuzzy and so messy most of the time that when I have a clean house, it helps me kind of undo all that messiness in my house. I don't know if you relate to this, Susi.
Totally. And you and I were talking earlier that from your background and where that came from, and that you know, from as a Hispanic, as a Mexican, that's your job. You keep the house clean. And what I said was so ironic is that's an English way. So I said you have something in common with the English culture.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And my brother's wife, my brother's South African English, but she is Mexican.
Oh.
And her pride and joy is in cooking and keeping the house clean to the point where I'm like hiding in the room because I'm afraid I'm going to make the house untidy.
Yeah.
That's a very good perspective because it's like it might be my own comfort zone, but if I have guests in my home, it might make them uncomfortable. So noted. Thank you, Susi.
Well, you know what? I think that one of the couple of things that happens is like when we talk about a lot about stereotypes and stuff like that, some things are just stories unfinished, right? Stereotypes are just generalizations, stories unfinished. Exactly. But there is some things that's important, right? Like creating community, specifically when in your house, right? Like in your home, you want people to come and feel immediately a part of a sense of belonging and family and familia, right? Like it's just a thing. Yes, and so all of those pieces need to be together. But on the other piece of that, right? You're a very driven person, right? Like you are very much organized, checklist. Like we have tons of checklists, y'all. One day we're just going to show you behind the scenes. It is hilarious.
And Liz all my spreadsheets.
And Liz has to cross it off. Like, it's like her thing, right? So anyway, long story short, I say that to say a part of wanting to get things in order is just really how we operate. And in general, we take that on into the workplace all the time, right? We want to get things done. We want to be a team player. We want to be carrying our load. We want to be rewarded. Like all of that plays in the part. But I'll tell you what, though, I'm with you. When my space is not clean, my mind is all over the place. But once my space is clean, it's like I can focus. I can be
but you know
driven.
what, Cherie? Like you mentioned something, and we'll get started into our like the meat of our podcast, because I know that we want to get into Susi's story.
Yes.
Part of that, I know I called it outsourcing, but actually it's reaching out to your community too, right? Having other people help you, bringing other people in to that circle.
Yes.
And giving them the privilege and to help you in
Yes.
certain things.
Yes.
That is what community is all about.
True.
So my whole theme in life is building community. So
Yeah.
I'm not doing myself any favors. I'm getting burnt out and I'm not in community. So there we have it.
And you could go ahead and just let it go and let somebody else do it so you can have time for other things, the 100 other
like our
things you're doing.
podcast.
Right. Okay. So anyway, if anybody is going through that right now, you are in good company. But let's get started. So we have a guest today. Susi's already started talking to you. So this is going to be really, really exciting. But you know how we introduce people here. I want you to know how I know them, why I connect with them, and why they're here. So this one is going to be interesting because Liz just met Susi and they clearly now have some kindred spirit going on. So let me just say, so Susi is a person. If you ever hear someone say, have you met a person, and they just insert one name, Susi's that person, right? So I've been a part of a lot of organizations where a lot of there's an interconnectivity around women, advancing women in different industries, and one specifically that I'm very passionate about, and specifically because of Susi, is about women being on boards. And she'll tell you more about the organization and things like that. But really what happened was Susi's been one of those people that if I go to different events, we see each other, and originally we would say hi, someone would introduce us as if though we never met, and we'll go through this thing, and then we became communal friends. But Susi pulled me aside one day, was like, can we have coffee soon? And usually when people do that, it's a really important conversation. So I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. We meet up, relatively soon. And she tells me a story about why is it like her journey, her career journey, and the ebbs and flows of it, and why it had led her to an organization that she now is passionately involved in. And when I tell you in that moment, I felt like I wasn't expecting that level of vulnerability. Someone just spilled a lot about who they were, what they were going through in their career with me, and just said, look, this is not where this story ends. My goal is to be 100% dedicated and making sure that women don't have the same experience, have better experiences. And this is what I'm going to do, is work on having women on boards. And, normally people, that's the end of the story, but she goes a level further and says, and I just want you to know, it's important to me that there are women of color on those boards too. Now, keep in mind, she could have just stopped at women, was like, okay, kindred, okay, we got that. But then all of a sudden she was like, no, and it's important for me to make sure there are women of color. And then she's like, I'm not perfect. I don't know everything about all the experiences, but I want to learn, and I want, you, your organization, whatever, to be a part of it. And when I tell you that level of vulnerability, that level of commitment, trust, when you think about, how you want to be included, that was one of those moments to say, okay, I'm not on the board. I have no idea how we're about to accomplish this huge goal that you're talking about, but just sign me up. I'm in, and I want to bring the community that's important to me in. So that's how I know Susi. Now, I'm going to pass it to Liz, because something has happened since they've been in London, and now I need to know the story.
Coffee and wine, basically. No, I mean, I think when Cherie introduces me to somebody, and she does the same thing to me, there's an immediate trust between Cherie and I. And so I never question anybody that Cherie introduces me to. And I said, there's a reason why Cherie is attached to this person, or she has a connection with this person. And then you and I spoke on the phone very briefly. Well, no, not really briefly. It was supposed to be
we chatted, and then
yes, and it was supposed to be a 30-minute conversation, and it became like over an hour long conversation. And we're like, I need to get to London, and and come and meet her up. And so here we are. But so Susie, thank you so much for coming on the More Than Words podcast. We're so excited to have you here and to hear about your story. I've heard little snippets about it, but I'm pretty sure it's even richer than what we imagined. So the first thing we like to do with all of our guests is talk about the diversity wheel. So you've had a chance to look at the diversity wheel, and I want to tell the audience a little bit about what are the top 3 dimensions that are important to you at this moment.
So hi everyone, I'm Susie Knight, and I live in Houston today. You live in Houston, but I'm in the UK, and now I'm torn totally about where to live because they're both great places. But right now my heart is in England, and the sky is blue, and
the sun is shining.
The sun is shining. It's not raining. Life is good. And I just want to say it's always interesting to me before I talk about the dimensions, things that you've said and how they impact people, and how you may not know how those words are impacting people. And, I don't really remember what I said, Shara, but all I know is you said, yes, I'm in. But I do remember, I think it was around the time of George Floyd, and there was just a lot going on. And that's when, my awareness really changed. And I was involved with, I thought of just women and as you know, making it easier for women to become executives and on boards. But it was the George Floyd situation and the awareness in a new way about the burden or the difficulty of when you're a woman of color, that I was just going through that, and I saw in my own team that I had built that I was lacking in diversity in my own team, and that was shocking to me. I was like surprised by myself that I hadn't been aware of that. And so I, in retrospect, and that was, I think what prompted the conversation. And at that time, you might remember, we did have different conversations from the first time we started to talk to each other about race and about our backgrounds in a more open way. So,
and the one thing, Susie, I think some people should hear is that you were very honest. You were like, this is where I am. These are the gaps that I have. And this is how, call me to the carpet if something comes up. Don't let me go down this rabbit hole again, right? Like I'm coming out of this blind spot, and now I want to be more intentional and aware. So we have a lot of those moments where like, okay, so Susie, or and it's so funny because we do it so much like how you should, very naturally, to say, okay, well, don't touch my hair, or not in public, like ask some questions, we can talk about that later, those things. And you are just so hilarious. You're like, okay, I can't wait. Make sure we talk about it so I can know, right? And then you apply it to so many places. You'll tell people, you're like, so I had the conversation with Cherie. So I know that's the no-no, and let's go. But I love that, Susie. I think
it's so interesting that, and I recently read the Book of Joy with the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. And we're all going, and what I got from that book, and I posted something earlier about, I'll make better mistakes. And I feel like that kind of encompasses that, because how are we all going to grow? We all carry biases. We all carry assumptions, depending on how we grew up or our life experiences. We're all going to make mistakes. And again, going back to the community side of it, we cannot do this without one another. You cannot do this silo. You couldn't grow in your awareness without someone like a Cherie or other people around you with different experiences. And that's why we started this podcast, right? Was because of the stories. And yes, for our listeners, I know you're driving in the car by yourself, but hopefully we give you that courage and that bravery to kind of go out there and make those mistakes, and then say, oh, hey, I made a mistake. I apologize, and have a little grace of it. And, gonna go, oh my gosh, I messed up there. And then tomorrow we'll make better ones, right? Yeah, better mistakes.
Sure. Yeah. I just, to close that out, Cherie, you may remember this year, I'm for the panel for 50-50 Women on Boards, you have to accommodate certain people that have sponsored and who have a voice. And so I had the panel put together. And actually, Shara and I spoke, and I said, Shara, I know I need to find someone else to put on this panel, because I looked, and it had age diversity, and it had skill diversity, but it really didn't have racial diversity, and I said to Shara, and she said to me, well, I'm so glad you said that, because I was going to call you out on it. So I said, I'm ahead of you. I'm already there.
I couldn't help myself. I was like, let me let her finish her sentence, but I'm gonna have to say something. But you know what though, Susie, it's because like when you create that environment that I can't, right? Like not everybody feels empowered to do that. And I'm a different phase in my life where I feel more empowered no matter if people give me the space or not. But there are people who need that. Like when you said, hey, listen, I recognize there's a gap here. I need your help. Or you were like, this is what I'm thinking. I've been cognizant of these things. Someone else really needs to hear that. Like that really matters to them. It matters to me for sure.
Yeah. And it matters to people who work for you as well, because as a leader of an organization, we're going to model your behavior. And when you have that behavior in the organization, it opens the doors for others to ask those questions or to say, oh, wow, okay, I do feel like I have a sense of belonging here. You know,
this podcast could go for about 2 hours.
I'm telling you. Right. So the next question, we'll move on. So in your dimensions, you know, what are the stereotypes that you face in the workplace or in your person, and what has been the impact?
Well, I answered the questions a little differently. I think the question was, what dimensions are important to me at the moment? Okay. So I made it very personal. I didn't make it, how do I feel professionally? I made it personal. And so it's in the context of where I am in my own life. And I had to spend quite a lot of time because going around that wheel, thinking about these things. And so the three that came up was actually my professional work. It did come up as that is still a big value for me, and that I want to continue to be involved and have been able to do that in London, and why I'm sitting on this podcast. So that having that, being able to contribute through my professional life is important. And then my geographic location is just a huge issue for me at the moment. Where am I going to live? How can I live there? Can I live in both?
Is that a bad problem to have?
Yeah. And how can I make that happen? And I'm so fortunate that I can do that because I have dual nationality, which is a whole, another question. And then, the other thing that came up was just because I'm in my 60s. I'm 65. I'm turning 66 in January. So was my physical ability. That's important, and I need to remember that for myself. But it's true for everybody, no matter, where you are in your life, because the importance of staying physically fit is a big one for me. And then the other one was my economic status. What does that mean? How do I, I don't even know what question to ask myself about that, other than how do I reflect? Is it okay for me to be where I am in my status in life? Is it okay for me to talk about the fact that I've worked hard, and that we were talking about this a little bit earlier, and that I've saved money, and therefore I have some freedom to do some things. But what does that mean in terms of how I deal with other people? And in particular, this came up for me because in London, there's so many different parts of London. So you've got East London, right, which is a certain it's can be a little kind of tough in East London. Then you can go to Hampstead, which is like beautiful. So, and then you can go to Crouch End, where my brother lives, and it's like a combination of both. So I'm trying to figure out what environment, what cultural environment, what community, to use your word, what community do I want to be in? And I don't want to be in an exclusive community. I want to be in an inclusive community. But I like nice coffee shops, and I like, nice restaurants. So I'm struggling with, how you blend those together.
We had a little bit of that conversation when we were talking about gentrification or one of our past episodes.
There you go.
And it's so interesting. Like we had so many different points of view, like people who were in a community that had changed drastically, or finding yourself trying to find a new community, right? And so it's interesting. Social economic doesn't normally pop up on an everyday basis, right? But when it does, it's one of those things that has to be a little bit like, ooh, where have I been? Like, I'm now here. My status has changed or is changing, and I need to now look at myself as others may see me, or the community in which I want to be in, and they want to see me. How do I create it? How am I going to be experienced by others? And I will say that, this is a great conversation. I hope that we are able to dive into it at another time. But this is a conversation many people are having and will continue to have throughout their transitions, especially the ambitious people that we come past, right? Like they're in the process of trying to be entrepreneurs, or they're moving in different stages of their life, or they had the great awakening, right? Where they were like, okay, company is not enough. I got more to give to the world, right? So I can't wait for us to get to that. But Susie, I do want to go back to something. This is the first time, I'm glad you shared this, but we've talked about your transition, right? You were adamant to say, I'm not retiring. That's not the word. But you're in this transition, and what have you named it? Because that was a big thing. Like our last conversation was, you're going to name it in a way that had a positive intent about all the things that you were going through around this transition.
I am just waiting to see. I'm in this blessed or fabulous position to just wait to see what life has for me. And it's been a long time. I have done this in the past, but I'd forgotten. So I would just say I'm open to what life is going to bring me.
Well, I know in our call, because to Cher's point, you didn't call it retirement. You called it a transition or a shift. And I think many people are going through something like that, whether it's a career shift or a personal shift, or because of the great awakening or the great resignation or the great breakup, whatever people want to call it. I call it the great breakup. But what advice would you give to someone that is going through a shift?
So let me go back and, mine was a little different. And so I need to frame a context about why I'm where I am today, which is joining financial services. I got to give just a little background.
Absolutely.
10 years ago, 12 years ago, I entered into the financial services business. And again, with reflecting last night, I realized I really hadn't experienced quite the discrimination or the preferred treatment for white men that I experienced when I went into financial services. And I fought the good battle, and I sought out other women, and I tried to find people that felt the same as me, and I was really struggling to do that. But it wasn't only the financial services, it's also, in all fairness, the regulatory environment of financial services, where I could not do what I'm doing right now with you. That was a big deal for me. I would have to go to compliance. I'd have to get, permission from God to be able to come and speak to you. And that was just killing my soul. So about 4 years ago, I had a couple of things happen to me at work where I made a mistake and I was condemned for that mistake. And I felt threatened that my whole livelihood was going to be ripped away from me. After going through that, I said, this is just not worth it. And it wasn't actually, it was another woman who was not supportive to me. So that happens too. It's not always gender discrimination. It can just be the unfriendly environment or the tough environment that you're in. And she herself was a victim of the environment. This is what she had to do in her role. So, and I just said, I can't do this anymore. And I looked for a partner in my business, and I was introduced to a younger partner who, And I actually made the decision to sell my clients back to and to exit the business. And so what was the question again? Oh, how do I make the transition? So the one I was thinking about this yesterday, and it's if you want to make change, be thoughtful about it and have a plan. It's so easy to just react emotionally and walk out the door. But I think if I had done that, I mean, I wouldn't have had the choices that I have today. So sometimes it takes patience and planning, and also try everything you can to stay in the environment you're in, and to make a change within that environment. Don't immediately give up. And so. And people, a lot of times in transition, I don't hear people talking a lot about being financially prepared. And that's a huge issue, because if you just walk out and you don't have the resources to take care of yourself.
The amount of stress that comes with that, having financial burden is...
Well, and then you lose the choice. You end up right back in the same situation because... and people get laid off and they think, oh, I've got 4 months.
Absolutely.
No, you don't.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad that you said that whole story, Susie, because I feel like that's going to resonate with so many people. I got chills when you were talking about that event that just kind of made you pivot, and the lack of autonomy that you felt like you didn't have. And I feel like many of our listeners are really going to appreciate that, because it gave me chills. And I just want to take a moment and acknowledge that, because it is something that happens, and it's something that ends up pivoting. I mean, we have this whole series.
They lost me because of that.
Yeah.
They lost my talent. That moment and how that was handled is the reason I'm no longer at that. At that company.
Yeah, and you know what? Oftentimes people, and I'm sure that there's to Liz's point, there's so many people who can resonate with it. But what's coming up for me is, some of my experiences has definitely been more such a death by 1,000 cuts. Like, it becomes so much so that you don't even know that it's happening, right? Like,
well, it's too, right?
This little thing, like these microaggressions here, like, it's
when you start reflecting back.
Yeah. Right. You start reflecting back from that big moment all the way to the many little moments that was kind of leading up and or just over time that you just have forgotten and made it your normalized experience. Yes. Like, these are the moments that we're going through. For it.
I beat myself up looking back at those 1,000 cuts and be like, man, how did I let this happen? And I think this whole, and I keep saying this, our society really is driven by fear a lot of the times.
Oh,
we need to break that cycle.
Scarcity.
We need to break those cycles. That's why joy is one of our podcast values, because it's something, that we're gonna go through difficult times. That is inevitable, but you can always have that underlying joy no matter what. And I think when I'm not driven by fear at the moment, and I don't have that glass ceiling anymore, right? Because that event made me pivot so much. And those cuts were so, yes, I did beat myself up at the beginning, but now that I've come on the other side of it and I've made my mistakes and I'm making better mistakes now, and I don't feel like I have that glass ceiling, right? I always talk about the infinite runways, and that's how I feel.
I feel, what I have to say is I feel sad when I think about it, because I was given that amazing opportunity. I'm letting it show my emotions, right? Because when I went into that business, I told you earlier, I'd had cancer, and I got that job. I got into that business while I was still recovering from cancer. And it was this incredible opportunity that I had been given at the time, where they were going to invest money in me. It was like I was a startup and I had my own business. And so what is sad is that, I was incredibly successful. I was in the top 5%, and yet I just couldn't reconcile staying there, and I couldn't get heard. And, you know, we talk about the stereotypes,
stereotypes.
okay? So the stereotypes, is, you know, is that I'm outspoken, bossy, which is probably true, but outspoken, bossy, and all of those, you know, all of that side of things. And I just, I didn't know how I could change that part of myself and still be true. Although being outspoken wasn't bad, but it was so argumentative, you know? And so it's just sad to me that, and the numbers reflect that I'm not the only one, because still today there's only 10% of financial advisors are women. 10%.
Well, it's a good question. If I can jump into this question, is, you know, we talked about the McKinsey report that came out, and women leaders are leaving the organization at higher rates than ever before. And I know you work on you're part of the 50-50 Women on Board.
Right.
How is 50-50 Women on Board responding to this potential pipeline issue? I mean, we were already having it, and now it's being further.
Well, I think you mentioned this earlier. It's about having more visibility of women who are already board members available, so that younger women can visibly see that there is a pathway for them to be on boards. And so I think when 50-50 started out 10 years ago, it was there, you know, there was 10% of independent board directors were women. I mean, today it's tracking towards 30%, so that's a big difference, right? So in the beginning, it was just like, how do we get executive women very focused to be board members? And now we've taken it to this new level. And Shara was at our event, and we had a lot of middle career women, even some younger women there. And so it's opening up their eyes. This is like everything else, just opening up their eyes to the possibility of these roles. And then we do now have training courses that are targeted directly to just, okay, what is a board? You know, what does a board do? And, you know, how do I today do things what action should I take in my career today that will make that possible for me 10 years, 15 years down the road?
Yeah.
So it's having the longer view to get on boards.
Yeah. I want to just take a moment. First and foremost, I want to go back to just the emotion you just shared with us. And I do want to acknowledge, I know the journey, more of the story, right? And I get to really just appreciate your vulnerability at the moment to share that transition and that, you know, the emotions that's coming up for you. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge it, to say, you know, there's a lot of people who are going through this, and we always spend the time on what's the beginning or the end or where you're going or the transition of the story. But there's a lot of emotion right now around, am I doing the right thing? And now that I've done this thing, you know, where am I? What's coming up for me? And how am I feeling? Where's my community? You know, what supports do I need? And I want to just call it out in this moment to say, no matter where you are in this transition, right? The decisions that you've decided to make, there's always a community for you. And Susie, you have a vast network of individuals, but I want to just submit for you to consider, where is your community, right? The place that you feel the most safe to go through these ebbs and flows of the emotions during your transition, and making sure that you find and be intentional around that. Because right now we have a number of clients who are going through this transition, and we've been on a lot of the high of it, right? Like, you know, it's new, it's shiny, but the road is coming where it's not going to have it. And a lot of the McKinsey report and others are saying, yes, there's a lot of people going through this. Yes, it's exciting, but like any change, it has its peak and then it has its, you know, straight road, right?
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to let you know, right, that, you know, I'm glad that you were open to share that and all the many pieces of it.
I just want to clarify that the sadness is not for me. The sadness is for the system.
Right.
The sadness
is that the
system is not working for any women. I'm just, you know, it's not about me. It's like this amazing organization, this amazing company that provides fantastic benefits. I think this is something else to talk about. The corporations are just throwing benefits, right? I've got, mental fitness, and I'm giving you all these benefits, but it's not, and I mean, don't want to mention the company, but the company was amazing in the benefits that it offers, family leave and this and that and the other. But somehow the system.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
that's the sad part.
That's the sad part. And I think I'm glad we called that out, right? There's an individual experience, there's a collective experience, right, that we're all going through. But I will say that, you're right. It is a system, right? We talk a lot about this on the podcast about, the company environment is a system. Is to keep you as much as possible, is to attract you, is to keep you. And it's going to serve some more than others who are more like the system that they want to create. And the more you deviate, the more you grow, you grow from that in group to the out group. And once you see,
right? You can't unsee, right? Because I mean, I'm fairly young in my career, and I could have been somewhere. Well, I am someone. No, but I mean, if I played the game and I wasn't bossy and I wasn't loud and I wasn't,
outspoken.
Yeah, outspoken. I wasn't a disruptor. I could have definitely been out there, but I've seen something and I cannot unsee it. And that environment just wasn't conducive to who I am. And I do a lot of career shifting coaching. And to Cherie's point on the ebbs and flows is figuring out your why, because the one thing I want to point out to here when we were talking, when Susie sat down and we talked for a little bit, she immediately wanted to reach out. You do a lot of I'm just assuming here, but you and a little bit what Cherie says.
You're right. She does.
You reach back a lot, so you're in this position of privilege in a lot of senses, right? And the first thing that she did, she says, I know a lot of people here, and I can. She was so willing.
Get you a job.
Yeah, she was so willing to just reach. And I mean, yes, I absolutely appreciate that.
Not a job, a consulting gig.
Right.
But she was so willing without even thinking about reaching back, right?
Always.
And if I can offer something, if I may, is maybe bring a little bit of selfishness and have others help you, kind of back to my auntie moment.
Please tell her, Liz, because I tell Susie all the time, like, tell us what you need. What do you need from us? How can we help? She's like, oh, I'm good. Everything. Let's just do this big, exciting thing. But that's why I went back to that question. Like, hey, it's okay to think about the collective, but what do you need for yourself in this experience, and what emotions are coming up for you, right? And make sure you have community, because Susie's that person. Okay, y'all think I like the network? Susie is at more than I'm at. Okay, like she be talking about events that I've been to like maybe 5 events in 1 week. Susie done been to like 8, 14, right? Like she's everywhere. But one of those things is she is always networking to make sure people are connected. But once again, one of the biggest pieces is, in your community, once you build community with somebody, you want the best for them individually too. And I think that's the two-way street we don't often talk about, which is like that individual connectedness and that collective connectedness that we all should have, and what we all may need in these particular journeys. And to that point, Susie, I have a question for you. So now looking back on your experience, right? You deal with so many different communities, the board community, so many different individuals throughout our network. But what would you say to someone early in their career who are really thinking about that upward shift, right, to leadership, or to even aspire to be on a board? Because this is where a lot of people are. They're like, the next 5 years are going to be this for me.
Well, funnily enough, I'd sort of say Liz might want to share what she's done in her life, because
they know my story.
She was sharing her story about how she came to work and how you came to college. And the consistent theme that I heard was raise your hand. Speak up. Yeah. And so I hear people all the time, well, what do I need to do? What course do I need to do? What qualification do I need to get? And I say this in Women on Boards too. They're like, oh, should I go here? And do I need that? And what other, stamp of approval do I need to know to tell other people that I'm valuable and worth it, right? A much simpler solution is to go, hey, hey, I'm interested, you know, and whether it's to get on the board, whether it's, hey, dating, you know, hello, you know, I mean,
that's right.
Thinking about it, right?
That's actually a good point, right? It does take a little bit of a jump out there for
that.
Yeah, you know, like I think younger women are better than that. But when I came up, it was like, oh, you didn't let anybody, you know, you didn't let any, and it's interesting, the analogy, right? Because you didn't let anybody know that you were interested.
Right, right.
Absolutely. Gosh, man, I can't remember the book that I read that it talked about that. It was specifically for women and being leaders. And it's like, I hear so many women say, you know, that they're frustrated, they feel stuck. And something that you brought up earlier was try to make it better where you are at now. Try to make that environment available to you. Do everything that you can for that in that environment
to make it work.
Yes. And then whenever there'll come a time where it works or it doesn't.
Yeah.
And I think so many people, like, especially what I hear from my experience on women that I coach is, you know, they feel stuck, they feel frustrated. There's a lot of outwardly pointing, like, well, they don't do this and they don't do. And so when I asked the question back to them, I said, well, what have you done to make this shift? And it's like, people aren't going to assume that you want a promotion or a leadership, because I experienced this when I was pregnant with my first child. I had conversations in the room where they were talking about me potentially not coming back. So you have other people who have biases or assumptions made out of you. But if you just raise your hand and said, actually, no, I'm gonna be like Beyonce. I'm gonna have a baby and then like get back to it, right? And then, you know, and I want that leadership role and I want to do this, this, and this. So I mean, I think that's such a powerful.
Yeah, not many women will say it like that.
Exactly. It's
with
true.
my nails.
It's true. So we need to have
and
it.
this is why you're living the life you are. This exciting, scary,
very scary,
changing
exciting
life. It's not a straight up path, but you know, has really been transformative to me, and I think this will help others, is that about a year ago I started looking into the mental fitness, and I've talked to you a little bit about it. It's been transformative for me in my life, and that was understanding what the saboteurs are, what the judge in my head is, what the judge is saying. You're not this enough, you're not that enough, or, you know, and understanding those voices in my head, and then using these practical tools to move from that mode into what we call the sage mode, which is, you know, and being more empathetic, which is what you guys are saying to me about myself. And I'm, you know, trying to learn how to do that, to be empathetic and say it's okay. And then to look at your environment and to try and navigate that environment, and then to, you know, just be open, which is what I'm trying to do right now. Crazy openness. What is going to come? You know, don't prejudge what all your opportunities are. So be creative around that flow, right? And then eventually you'll kind of figure out, okay, this is what I want to do. And then it's taking the action and raising the hand. So a lot of people will get to, you know, get almost there, but then the fear holds them back. And so the other thing that I've been learning, I struggled with depression and anxiety, really more anxiety than depression. And this program has helped me so much with the anxiety. And the anxiety was coming from quasi PTSD, where I'd had bad experiences in my life. And so I was projecting that now, because that had happened in the past, it was going to happen to me in every other situation. And so this program has helped me so much to just stay in the moment, right? And just breathe and stay in the moment, and then let today happen, because, you know, maybe it'll be a good day, you know?
Yes.
So it's really changed for me. Yeah.
And Susi, I can
that.
tell. Yeah, I can tell, because let me just say, in a past Susi moment, we would have been like, and she's like always moving and shaking, right? It's like, okay, so we talking about this event, but then let me talk to you about something that's going to happen 3 months from now. And then next year, we're going to be doing this. And I used to first of all, your energy is infectious no matter where you are. Like, You are Susie, and people know who that is. They never even have to say your last name. But what I will say is one of the biggest pieces about right now that I get to reflect, see as someone in your community, is that you are holding space for yourself to be present. And I think a lot of people are going to be surprised because you don't spend a lot of time on you. And that was the reason I asked you to come. Less about the work that we do, because that's just something that we are passionate about and we love, but more about you as the person, because the you as the person has really driven a lot of the energy into the spaces that you operate in. Any place that you decide you want to invest in, you bring all of this to it, and to see that you get to be present, right? And not just in the plan and in the future and all of that. I am just I'm literally I was speechless over here for a minute. I'm just smiling. I'm sure the video
that's a very common trait in finance people who have anxiety. Let me just say that, because I feel like I've seen that so much time. I have the same thing. What am I sharing? Like, I always talk about 10 steps ahead. I'm like, always. I'm never enjoying the moment. I'm always talking 10 steps. Susie, thank you so much for sharing your story. I feel like we need a part 2 in this.
We do, because I have so many questions still.
I know, me too. I got questions in blue that I didn't get to, but
sorry.
No.
That's okay.
I mean, I definitely want to talk about, I know you have a big passion on the financial investment side as well as ESG.
I do.
I want to have a whole episode on that, because that's something that's a big thing. It's definitely a little bit ahead in the US, but in the UK, it's something that is just now starting in the UK.
Right.
Is the ESG movement. And it's interesting to be in both countries and experience the difference between the two. I want to talk more about women on board. And I mean, I just want to have Susie with me.
Yes.
Like, I think this is going to be great.
Yes.
But I just want to thank you, Susie, for coming onto our podcast and sharing your story and being vulnerable with us and showing that vulnerability, because, we get lost in lives at time, and we don't want to show that vulnerability because we have fear, right?
For sure.
Yes.
Well, go ahead.
No, Susie, I just want to thank you. Like, I really do. I want to thank you, because I know that, between you and Liz, y'all probably looking at our list of questions that we haven't gotten to, but to be present in this moment with y'all, like, I think the people who know you, Susie, is going to really value this conversation, because what you all don't know is this is like her way of unveiling, right? Like, a lot of people come here and they're at the middle or the end of their, like, hey, I went through this, right? But Susie is actually in her transition to, like, the exciting part of something new, and she has this great legacy and that people know and love. But I don't know how much you know that we're excited for this transition that you're on. Like, your community is very excited for you. Aww. And so I just want you to hear that from me and the many others who are in your network. And so I'm glad that you showed up in this way so that everyone else can hear more about you as a person versus the organizations you've been attached to. So thank you so much, Susie. It meant a lot. And I'm glad you felt the safeness to do it.
Well, thank you both. I mean, Shara, I don't know if you recognize this or not, but you've been an advocate and a mentor for me, and so you've made a difference. And now Liz as well. So.
Thanks. That means a lot.
Virtual hug to you.
Virtual hugs. Okay. If y'all not watching YouTube, you're missing it.
Yeah, I'll be home on Wednesday, so.
Perfect. We'll connect then. And y'all are not invited. No, Liz, you stay, because I need to come to you. But Susie, when you come, we're going to meet up. And then listeners, y'all not invited, because I got to get the tea on what they were really doing in London. Okay. So listen, we're going to wrap up. For those of you who thank you so much, Susie, to our guests. Liz, run them down. Tell them how they can connect with us.
Yeah. Follow us on Instagram at More Than Words Podcast. Send us your questions. Who do you want to see? We're preparing a great 2020-23.
I was like, how many? We need all the 20s. All the 20s.
We don't want to do 2020 again. Send us an email at lizandshara@morethanwordspodcast.com. Follow us on IG. Like, share, all those things.
Yes.
Click,
all right.
whatever.
We'll see you all later in the next episode. Bye.